a small Italian pistol gets taped behind a toilet tank in a restaurant bathroom in the Bronx. One young man walks in to retrieve it, sits back down at a table with two men who want him dead, and fires twice at close range. No dramatic music, no slow motion, no speech. Just 2 shots and 30 years of consequences. That single moment in 1972 changed the grammar of movie violence permanently. And the gun that made it possible was so deliberately chosen, so perfectly matched to the scene, that most people who have watched this film a dozen times could not tell you what it was. Hi, my name is Chris, and this is Movie Guns. The scene itself. Watch the bathroom sequence from the beginning, and pay attention to what Coppola is actually doing to you. Michael Corleone excuses himself from the table. He walks to the bathroom. He finds the gun exactly where Clemenza told him it would be. He stands over the sink. He looks at himself in the mirror. His hands are shaking. And here is the thing most people miss entirely. The shaking hands are not a weakness detail. They are a calibration device. Coppola is telling your nervous system exactly how dangerous this moment is by showing you that even the man about to commit the violence is frightened of it. Your brain reads that signal and it tightens everything up. Your shoulders come forward slightly. Your breathing gets a little shallower. You are not watching a confident killer walk out of a bathroom. You are watching a college-educated war veteran who has never killed in cold blood, about to cross a line he cannot uncross. Then he sits back down, and nothing happens for what feels like a very long time. Sollozzo starts talking in Italian, no subtitles. Coppola made a deliberate choice to leave that dialogue untranslated, so the audience experiences exactly what Michael experiences. You do not know what is being said. You just know what is about to happen, and you cannot stop it. The train noise from outside builds underneath the scene. That sound design choice, by the way, is doing more work than most people give it credit for. The train is external, uncontrollable, mechanical, getting louder whether anyone wants it to or not. It is a timer you cannot pause. And your brain registers it the same way you register a clock ticking in a quiet room. Then Michael stands up and shoots. 2 shots. That is it. The whole thing lands harder than most action sequences built around 50 rounds and a car chase. And the gun he used to do it is a large part of the reason why. The gun, Beretta model 1934. Let me tell you about the Beretta M1934, something that almost nobody mentions when they talk about this scene. This gun is Italian, not Italian-American, not a nod to the heritage of the Corleone family, actually Italian. Designed and manufactured in Gardone Val Trompia, in the province of Brescia in northern Italy. The Beretta company had been making firearms since 1526, which means they were building weapons before Shakespeare was born, before the printing press reached England, before most of the countries that later bought their guns even existed as nations. I find it genuinely funny that a company older than the concept of America is still in business today selling pistols to American police departments. But here we are. The M1934 entered production in 1934, which is where the straightforward part of its name comes from. The Italian Royal Army adopted it as their standard service sidearm, and it went everywhere their soldiers went. North Africa, Albania, Greece, the Eastern Front. When Italian forces surrendered to the Allies in 1943, enormous quantities of these pistols ended up floating through the black market channels that fed into post-war organized crime networks across Europe and America. That pipeline matters for this story. We will come back to it. Mechanically, the M1934 is a semi-automatic pistol operating on a straight blowback action. When you fire a round, the expanding gas pressure pushes the slide rearward. The slide ejects the spent case, compresses the recoil spring, and strips a fresh round from the magazine on its way back forward. No rotating barrel, no short recoil locking system, just physics doing its job in the simplest possible sequence. The magazine holds 7 rounds of 32 ACP, that is 32 automatic Colt pistol, a cartridge designed by John Browning in 1903. A 32 caliber bullet, roughly 81 grains, moving at approximately 900 feet per second out of this barrel, generating around 140 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. I know what you're thinking, that sounds small. Compared to 45 ACP, it is small. Compared to 44 Magnum, it is tiny. But I want you to hold that thought because the size of that cartridge is not a weakness in this scene. It is the entire point of the scene. And I will explain exactly why in the next section. What you need to understand right now is the physical profile of the gun itself. The M1934 is flat. Genuinely flat. The slide width measures roughly 28 millimeters. The overall length is 149 millimeters. Loaded weight sits around 650 grams. This pistol fits inside a jacket pocket without printing. It disappears under a waistband. And critically for the scene we are discussing, it fits behind a toilet tank in a restaurant bathroom in the Bronx without requiring any elaborate concealment engineering. Clemenza did not need to disassemble a light fixture or hollow out a wall. He taped a flat Italian pistol behind a porcelain tank, and it stayed there until Michael needed it. That is elegant in the way that only genuinely practical things are elegant. Why close range changes everything. Here is what Hollywood gets wrong about close-range pistol kills about 90% of the time. The movies trained you to believe that a small caliber round at close range is less dangerous than a large caliber round at distance. The logic seems to make sense on the surface. Bigger bullet, more damage. Plus, more distance, less energy. So a small bullet up close must equal somewhere in the middle, right? Wrong. Completely wrong. And the physics of why it is wrong is one of the most important things this channel has ever explained. At contact distance, a 32 ACP round is not fighting physics anymore. Physics is helping it. When a bullet impacts tissue at velocities above a certain threshold, it does not just punch a hole, it creates a temporary cavity. A shock wave moves through soft tissue faster than the tissue can elastically respond. The tissue stretches and snaps back, and the damage radius extends well beyond the actual bullet diameter. This effect is more pronounced with faster, lighter bullets at close range before velocity has bled off over distance. Michael sits across a small restaurant table from Salozzo. We are talking about maybe 3 feet of separation when the gun comes up. At that range, the 32 ACP round out of a Beretta M 1934 is moving at full catalog velocity. No drop, no drag, no energy bleed. Whatever the ballistic specification says is exactly what Salozzo and McCluskey receive. And here's the other thing nobody talks about. Salozzo is shot in the head. McCluskey is shot in the throat and then the head. The headshot with any pistol caliber at 3 feet is not a stopping power equation. It is a mechanical interruption of the central nervous system. The caliber becomes largely irrelevant at that point. The Corleones did not choose a 32 ACP because it was powerful. They chose a 32 ACP because it was quiet, concealable, reliable, and more than sufficient for 2 men seated across a table. The gun was not designed for a war. It was designed for exactly this, a close-range termination in a confined space with minimal noise signature and 0 chance of the weapon being spotted during the approach. That is not an oversight in the prop selection. That is weapons logic applied to narrative construction. The real-world logic of the weapon choice. Now let us talk about why the Corleones would have actually used this specific gun. Post-war American organized crime had a complicated relationship with European pistols, and the Beretta M 1934 sits right in the middle of that relationship. When the war ended in 1945, surplus military weapons moved through the same underground channels that moved everything else. Cigarettes, morphine, stolen vehicles, firearms. A pistol that saw service in the Italian military in 1942 could realistically end up in New York by 1948 through 3 different sets of hands, none of whom kept records. That untraceable quality was not a minor detail for organized crime. It was a primary operational requirement. A gun with no registered owner, no serial number history in American records, and no domestic purchase paper trail was worth considerably more to a crime family than its catalog price suggested. The flat profile of the M1934 also addressed a specific tactical need that American revolvers could not solve as cleanly. Revolvers print. The cylinder creates a bulge under clothing that even a casual observer can read as a weapon if they know what to look for. The Beretta's flat frame disappeared under a suit jacket in a way that a snub-nosed .38 simply could not match in 1945 or 1972, or today for that matter. And then there is the suppressor compatibility question. The M1934's straight blowback design and threaded barrel variants made it friendlier to suppressed operation than most American pistols of the same era. I am not suggesting the restaurant sign involved a suppressed weapon. It did not. But the organizational preference for the Beretta within certain European crime networks was partly built on that capability. And that preference is what put the gun in the pipeline that would eventually put it behind a toilet tank in the Bronx. The Corleones chose the right gun. Whether Mario Puzo knew all of this when he wrote the novel is a different question, but the logic holds regardless. Coppola's deliberate choices. Francis Ford Coppola did something in the casting of Michael Corleone's hands that almost no director would have had the nerve to do. He put the wrong man in the scene on purpose. Al Pacino was not a physically imposing presence. He was 5'7", slight, with dark eyes that read as intelligent and internal rather than threatening. He looks like a man who belongs in a law school classroom, not a restaurant bathroom retrieving a planted weapon. And Coppola understood that this wrongness was the entire engine of the scene. The Beretta M 1934 reinforces that wrongness. It is not a powerful-looking gun. It does not fill Pacino's hand the way a Colt single-action army fills Val Kilmer's hand in Tombstone. It does not dominate the frame the way the Model 29 dominates Clint Eastwood's fist in Dirty Harry. It is a small, flat pistol held by a small, slight man. And the combination reads as fundamentally out of place in a scene about professional violence. That visual dissonance is what makes the moment so difficult to shake. When Michael raises that gun, your brain is running two calculations simultaneously. The first calculation says, this man looks wrong for this moment. The second calculation says, the gun is already up. And there is nothing anyone can do about it. The gap between those two calculations is where the dread lives. Coppola holds you in that gap for just long enough that the shots, when they come, land with a physical impact that has nothing to do with the .32 ACP's ballistic specification. The gun and the man match each other. Neither one looks like what it actually is. Both of them are considerably more dangerous than they appear. And the scene works because Coppola understood that equation and built every frame around it. The legacy. Here's the strange thing about the Beretta M 1934's place in cinema history. Nobody talks about it. Nobody has a replica on their wall. Nobody dressed as Michael Corleone in the bathroom scene for Halloween. No gun manufacturer ran a marketing campaign tying their product to the Godfather, the way Smith & Wesson has openly credited Dirty Harry for reshaping their brand. The gun that fired the most important two shots in the history of American crime cinema is essentially invisible in the cultural conversation about movie weapons. And that invisibility is the most Doc Holliday thing about the entire situation, except in reverse. Where the Lightning and the single-action army demanded to be seen and remembered, the Beretta M 1934 succeeded by disappearing. The gun did its job so completely, so quietly, so efficiently, that the audience walked out of the theater in 1972 remembering Michael Corleone and forgetting entirely what he was holding. That is the bathroom scene's entire thesis applied to the weapon itself. Every assassination movie that came after The Godfather owes something to that scene. The slow build, the mundane setting, the absence of music at the critical moment, the small caliber weapon at close range with no theatrical presentation. You can draw a direct line from Michael Corleone standing up from that table to every quiet, considered, close-range kill in cinema since then. Leon the Professional. No Country for Old Men. Killing them softly. All of them are having a conversation that The Godfather started in 1972 with a flat Italian pistol and 2 shots. The Model 29 made audiences feel powerful. The Peacemaker made audiences feel historical. The Star, 1858, made audiences feel afraid of something waking up in a man's chest. The Beretta M 1934 made audiences feel something worse than all of them. It made them feel like it could happen at a restaurant table, with no warning, with a gun nobody saw, by a man who looked like he should not be there. 2 shots. That is all the M 1934 needed. One for Sollozzo, one for McCluskey. And somewhere inside those two trigger pulls, the college kid who was supposed to stay clean crosses into something he will spend the rest of the film and the rest of 2 sequels trying to live with. The gun does not transform Michael Corleone. It reveals him. It shows you in him simultaneously what he was always capable of becoming. And Coppola found a weapon flat enough, quiet enough, and invisible enough to carry that revelation without announcing itself. The Beretta M1934 is not the most powerful gun ever filmed. It is not the most famous. It is not the one collectors hunt for at gun shows or replicate for display cases. It is a small, flat Italian pistol that was already 20 years old when it appeared on screen, built by a company that was already 446 years old when Italy issued it to their soldiers. And it is the most perfectly chosen weapon in the history of American cinema. Because the whole point of Michael Corleone is that you do not see him coming until it is too late. Neither did you see the gun. That is the most Godfather thing about all of it.